So we are live. Thanks for joining. I appreciate that. As I was mentioning, I think we'll stick with this 8 o'clock time for a little bit and see how that goes for folks.
Okay.
And then I'm looking at my phone here, looking up a scripture real quick. Sorry.
No worries.
Before I hopped on, I was dealing with a church item that I had to care for, so I was a little bit late.
I was just watching the healthcare debate from last night.
Oh yeah, who did that involve?
It was Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders, and Ted Cruz just walked all over him.
Okay.
Oh,
What I saw that, was that on CNN?
Yeah.
Okay. I saw that was on, but I didn't tune into it. Interesting stuff. So I guess there's a series of verses. So it's thinking about 1 Nephi chapter 11. And we're familiar with this because this is the amazing vision that Nephi had of the Savior and the gospel and his people and I don't know, everything, the vision of everything that he had.
yep.
Pretty much, right? And it's this interaction between he and the Spirit, or this angel, who is instructing him, and it's a learning process. And so it fits into this thought that I wanted to share. Verse 8 is an example of this. So he will show Nephi something. He'll use a certain word to invite him to learn, and then Nephi, you'll find that Nephi discovers things for himself through these promptings. Verse 8, it came to pass that the Spirit said unto me, Look, the tree, and it was like unto the red scene, and the beauty thereof was far beyond, yea, exceeding of all beauty, and the whiteness thereof did exceed the whiteness of the driven snow. And it came to pass that after I had seen the tree, I said unto the Spirit, I behold, thou hast shown unto me the tree which is precious above all. And he said unto me, What desirest thou? And I said unto him, to know the interpretation thereof. And then that process happens again, verse 12, and you'll notice it here. It came to pass that he said unto me, Look. And I looked as if to look upon him, and saw him not. He had gone from my presence. And then he sees the city of Jerusalem and sees the ministry of the Savior. The word that sticks out to me there is look. Look with an exclamation point. Look, Nephi.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are learning by the Spirit, when we're learning with the guidance of the Holy Spirit especially, it's as if that the Spirit is showing us things. Sometimes the Spirit tells, but many times the Spirit shows us things. And so we have to look. And the thought, and I've actually shared this with some of you, but the thought, it came from one of my former stake presidents. He said, what you thought was what you saw before you looked. And
What you saw is what you thought before you looked.
yeah, what you thought was what you saw before you looked. So that can fit into many, many things, spiritually or temporally or anything we encounter. Sometimes we act quickly upon our assumptions, right? Oh, it's this, or oh, I don't know, or I can't figure this out. Well, take a look. And I think about this angel or the Spirit telling Nephi to look with an exclamation point. Think about this. Take a minute, ponder, take a reverent moment to understand or discover or see anew. And that phrase has come to mind a lot, especially when I have a gripe, or especially when I'm frustrated about something, or I'm having trouble learning something. And take a look, say a prayer, seek the help of the Lord, and work through it. So anyway, I thought about look and being like Nephi, being a good learner like Nephi, who can learn by the Spirit. So
I like that.
Excellent. So appreciate that. And welcome Julie to the call. She's joining us. That's my wife, so she's joining in tonight. Excellent. So, how are things going?
It's pretty easy, I feel like. I don't want to say that it's too easy, but it's been easy.
Well, good. Well, that's not a bad problem.
Maybe I'm just good at school. I don't know.
A good student. There you go.
Yeah, something like that. I have a 5 to 10 page paper to write for another class by Friday, and I haven't started it, so that's gonna be fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What class is that for?
I think the course is called Tests and Measurements, but it's psychological assessment. So we're learning about what tests are appropriate and like what testing methods are appropriate and how to determine if tests are actually good. Things like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that like a science type class?
It's a psychology class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So basically.
Okay, great. So research type of deal. Good. Well, if this class is easy for you, then maybe that'll be easy too. How did things go for your first doohickey paper?
It was good. I felt like I did more of the work than the rest of my group, but I think that's just me wanting to get a better grade or something of that nature.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Well, good. I am grading those as we speak, so I will have those all graded definitely by Monday morning. Put a 7-day window on those. So. How about you, Monique?
I thought it was interesting to do the doohickeys part. We were able to, we discussed it and split it up. I'm anxious to see what the final paper looked like. And so we divvied it up with each of us had pieces to it, and then one summed it all up and wrote it.
Oh, okay.
And so in other words, we each did our portion of it, and then they just compiled it into the one paper.
Excellent. And it's interesting. I always see teams do it different ways, and that's a common way. And it's good to have someone to at least be some sort of compiler, just to make sure it sounds similar.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So I'm anxious to see. She didn't email it to us, so I'm A, hoping it got turned in, and B, I'd like to see what it turned out like. So,
Oh, okay.
there's that whole kind of faith part, whether it got done or not, because we can't see that.
All right. Well, no, I would agree. Groups, if your whole group hasn't seen the paper, send it to each other so you can see the product.
Yeah.
At a glance, they all look really good.
Good.
I was just gonna say, for like best practice, if you've got an editor assignment, they send it to the whole group prior to submitting to the teacher.
Okay.
That's what we've done. In our group, everyone does their part. The editor compiles it. Hey, here's one last look before it goes in. Speak now or forever hold your peace type of deal.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. And typically I've done that in other classes as well. We have a really good group. I feel we're very cohesive and work well together. And so I'm totally confident that it was taken care of and done well. But the unknown is always.
Yeah, the unknown and the unseen. Okay.
Yeah. So, but like I said, we work well as a group. We've had some great discussions. And so that's been really good.
All right.
One thing I feel like is worth mentioning about the doohickeys problem is that, at least for the case study that we did for the paper last week, I felt like some of the stuff was almost too obvious of a problem. Like that kind of hypothetical scenario would never actually happen. And I feel like maybe that's a little bit detrimental to the nature of the assignment, but
okay.
It's definitely pretty easy to figure out what's wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know what could be done to improve that in particular, but
yeah, no, that's good feedback. Appreciate that.
Though, I gotta say, even though they seemed obvious, they really are things that happen in a real business, in the real world. A lot of the things that I saw there, I have seen in various businesses. And so we may think, oh yeah, seriously? But it's true.
You never know. And I talk to my boss all the time. It's like, well, don't ever say you've seen everything in HR.
I bet.
Especially if you're not working with Mormons.
Well, Mormons too.
Well, I was going to say, even then, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's a great person. We had a LDS manager that we had to let go for an issue. So people are human, and people say, "How do you work in HR? Isn't that terrible?" And I say, "No, it's fascinating because you never know."
Yeah.
So it's good, and the case, the doohickeys case, it is a manufactured case. It's not
Mhm.
a true case, but it was written up by the content team. Some of it is pretty blatant, but
Yeah.
it's also a learning tool because we want you to be able to really talk through and think through how to address some of those big issues. I mean, sexual harassment is probably the biggest one in there.
Yeah.
We've got to know how to think through that and how to address the policy issues that involves. What does an employee do when it happens? What does a manager do when they hear about it? It's quite the conversation, quite the process to think through. So, but yeah, we're always open to new ways to look at that and make changes for the course. So, good deal. So, what's the big deal about recruiting?
I struggle with this one mainly because finding the best candidate isn't necessarily a priority for me personally. Like, I live by the philosophy that everybody kind of has their place. And
Okay.
if it's not there, then it's not there, but it should be somewhere else. And like, I feel like in this case, I forget what the name of the case study was for this week, but I was looking at each profile for each person who was a prospective hire, and like some of the conclusions that people were coming to were based on snap judgments and like really picky personal aspects of their lives that I felt like weren't appropriate to be discussed in a professional setting.
Okay.
And it really makes me wonder how much that kind of decision making is done in the real world, and whether or not it even should be, and who's even keeping tabs on it, you know?
It's a valid point. So does that happen? The
Oh,
snap
yeah.
judgments, the maybe decision factors that maybe shouldn't be decision factors in a hiring decision?
Yes.
Yeah. So anything come to mind, Monique, as you give the affirmative on that?
You know what? I work with the public schools, and I've got a colleague who's been tried to get hired on permanently. And she's tried for several years now, and she is probably one of the best coworkers that I have. But they won't hire her, and I think it's totally because of her ethnical background.
Really?
She's Middle Eastern. I think it's very quick to say, "Oh, you know what? We don't want to hire somebody like that." And I don't know why. And I get what our country's been through and whatnot, but I truly believe there's no reason why she shouldn't have been hired by now. But it's a real quick knee-jerk reaction. Oh, look at her, maybe not.
One of the things in the case study that really struck me with this is that they were reluctant to hire one of them because he had a family and he wasn't going to be able to devote the kind of time that a single person would be able to devote. And I'm reading this, and this is just the way trade firms work, I assume. But they expect people to work like 70 or 80 hours a week, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
Why don't you get the whole family situation out of the picture, and maybe open your eyes to the fact that there are a lot of people who you could hire who maybe aren't at the top of their class necessarily, but they have the qualifications and they would do a good job. So why not divide that workload into something a little bit more manageable? And if people want to go beyond that, they still can, assuming they have the merit to back them up. Like it really begs the question of, is the way we structure this business the best way to do it? And I would say no.
I was just going to say, it all depends. I mean, I get that industry. Investment banking is tough. I mean, you look at Goldman Sachs, these apprenticeships, these first years, they got to go in, and it's all, it's sort of the old school, good old boys club where you got to just grind it out the whole time. And, but other industries, I mean, other industries are like for example, our division, our company, we like families because the guys that are family oriented are hard workers. They got to provide. They need to provide for somebody, and so I'm not so worried about how much time they are at the job, as long as but the quality of time. So if they're there working really hard, 7 hours might be able to do it. They don't need to stay the 12 hours. But so I don't know. I just think it all depends.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from with that too. Like why not open the employment for double the amount of employees and have them work half the time, which is still full-time employment, if they can have the merit to be able to work in the same quality and get the same amount done in the same amount of time.
Don't you think that comes though from the management or the CEO or whoever's the head of that particular company? That's who's driving whether you hire more people or whether you push for overtime or longer hours.
See, now I'd love to do leadership coaching as a career, but I'm pretty sure the things I tell people, no one would want to hear them. So I'd probably not actually have a job.
Well, hey, maybe so. It's okay to have a dissenting view. No, you guys raised great points. So, high finance banking industry, yeah, it's tough. But I think the question that's being discussed is, okay, well, does that justify working people so hard? Is there a better or different or more efficient way to do it? Exactly. Maybe so. And it would take a lot to change that. So something comes to mind when we discuss that. I think what creates that environment. Monique, you mentioned leadership. You mentioned CEO, kind of making those decisions, setting that tone. Think about banking, the banking industry. What else might have set that precedent?
I think that it's just the fact that money talks, and like you've got all these people with high stakes investments who need to make sure that they're actually making money. But again, are we splitting hairs at this point? I think we are.
Yeah. Well, and I agree. Yep, money talks, and also just tradition.
Yeah.
How much of it's tradition? And I think where HR is heading is being a strategy partner for organizations. And then you look at the work environment out there's a lot that's changing. We'll talk about it later in the semester. There's a lot more contract work these days. There's a lot more remote workers. There's a lot more flex time schedules out there. So there's room for that, but tradition sometimes holds us back. Or another way to put that is, it's the way we've always done it. It's what works. Is that a good idea? Is that a good phrase? Or what are some drawbacks to that type of thinking, do you think?
I mean, obviously, if you're not willing to consider new things, then you're probably not even going to consider the new things that are happening around you either. So there's a problem. But
Agree. Yeah, it kind of closes your mind, or you get in tunnel vision sometimes. So, love the reference to the case. Great example of it, and a really tough industry. Adjustments that they made of who they're recruiting and how. The other guide, the definitive guide to recruiting in good times and bad, has some great thoughts in there. I have a note in the margin that executives or CEOs are often really good about revenue planning. They can read that balance sheet. They can crunch the numbers. They can make it work. They can drive that revenue. But I think where executives can lack or leaders can lack is in talent planning. And it's something to think through. What's the pipeline? We know where the money's coming from, but do we really know our talent profile? And if we do, excellent. Excellent. Because if we know what we're good at, if we know what our focus is, if we know what key competencies we want to focus on, it's going to link right into our strategy. Whereas if we don't, we're going to make wrong hiring decisions. So, what's the price of a wrong hiring decision?
I honestly, I don't want to steal the discussion, so I'll just make it brief. But I, I think
You're doing great.
Yeah.
I think that people think that the price of hiring the wrong person is a lot higher than it actually is in some cases. In other cases, it can be really high. Like, I'll just give an example from the jobs that I've worked here in Rexburg. I don't know if you know, and this might even be good case study material if you want to go as far as to like talk to the company and write something up and like maybe change some names around. But I used to work for SSI. And the whole reason why I quit is because they had a supervisor there who's just completely insufferable. He would like verbally abuse his agents like constantly. And the leadership there was completely, he had his head in the sand about the entire thing. And he wound up promoting this guy who was just constantly abusing everyone. And that extended into the entire organization at that point, the entire center. And corporate had no idea any of this was going on, despite the fact there were agents complaining left and right. And I don't know what HR was doing. Like, the way they have HR set up there is that they just try to direct people to get something solved. But usually with the way the policy is, you have to go to the management if you have a complaint about a supervisor, and the management is within the center. So if there's a manager who's the problem because he's got his head in the sand the entire time, corporate's never going to find out any of this is going on. That's exactly what happened. And then when they finally did, they fired both of them on the spot. And this all happened after I had left. And if I had stayed, I'd probably be a supervisor there right now, just because of the issue that happened. But what wound up happening with the company overall is that you had a turnover rate problem like you had with doohickeys, where it's just a revolving door and nobody wants to work there. Not only because of the nature of the work, that's just like a problem with doing surveys in the first place. People don't want to be on the phone for all that time doing nothing. But if you have somebody who's abusing you the entire time you're trying to do this job that nobody likes, no one's going to want to stay there. And now their reputation is shot on top of it. So there's one example where like it can be really bad, but I also think there are some examples where it can not be as much of a problem as people think. Like, it goes back to what we talked about before about snap judgments and stuff, where you might have someone who seems like they could be a bad employee, but if you take the time to train them, they could be the best employee you'll have at the end of the day.
And not only that, I think if you find the right place for them, because you may think this was the right placement for them, but in reality, they don't fit in that role at all, but a different place in the company might be a much better fit.
I like it. That adds to what was being said about good to great, getting people on the right bus, getting the right people on the bus, but also getting them on the right seat on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly. I love that part from good to great, right? Do I remember that right? It's good to great.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that was a great analogy, getting people not only on the bus, but in the right place on the bus.
So how do we know where to put how do we know how to get our people on the right place?
Well, I think communication is a big part of it. And taking the time to really get to know not only what their strengths are, but what their deficits are, and figure out where that fits into the company best.
Okay, communication. Yeah, we've got to know our people. We've got to be talking with them. Yeah.
So I think in the case study, the way they chose to hire people was kind of interesting, because I don't think it was the most effective way.
Yeah.
Now that I took the time, because by the time we had our discussion, I hadn't gone through all the readings yet. But one thing I learned from the hiring reading is that, I think it was the hiring reading, but one thing I learned from that is that you need to take time after you've actually hired the person to see how well they actually fit. And that's like 10 times as important as anything you do beforehand. And the way the company in the case study did it is they would just hire them, and that would be it. But I think it would be more beneficial for companies to do something like a mass internship where they organize like a team of candidates to work for them for a certain more longer term period of time, to kind of take some more time to actually figure out what people have in terms of strengths and weaknesses, instead of going based on a first impression and then going from there. I feel like that would be better. And I don't see many people doing that. And maybe that lends to tradition, like what we were talking about before. But
I totally agree with that. I can't remember which company it was, but I had read about this. They hire people, and I think it's either a six week or 2-month period, and they go through training, extensive training, and at the end they offer them, I think it was $2,000 to quit. And at that point, people, they've already ascertained, are they going to fit into the company? Are they not going to fit into the company? And a lot of people that really don't want to work there, they'll take the $2,000 and walk away from it. But then you've really got, you've taken the time to train them. You've gotten to know where they'll fit into the company. And there's no love lost as you part ways.
Yeah, I love that. So we think, oh man, $2,000 for somebody to quit. I think that's pretty cheap compared to what you would lose if somebody doesn't want to be in the job, they're not performing. You know.
Absolutely.
I think that was at Amazon.
No, I don't think it was Amazon. Gosh.
Or maybe Netflix. Is it Netflix? Because they've done something similar. We'll talk about Netflix. It's actually part of our final exam.
Maybe I thought it was a brilliant idea.
It's a good way to look at it. What do you think of all this, Amadeo? Are you still with us?
Well, sorry, I was the 7 o'clock kind of threw me back a little bit, just so, or PST, 8 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So I was on the phone. I usually go out and do visits on Wednesdays for my calling. So I was just talking to my one of my counselors.
Oh, no worries. Multitasking.
Yeah. So I've been kind of away for just a second.
Oh, that's all right. I was doing the same thing before I hopped on. So, well, I really the point about giving people time is an important point. The step 6 in the definitive guide case. So step 5 is close the deal, right? It goes through the whole process of recruiting talent in. Step 6, in my opinion, is the most important one. Integrate the newcomer. And they make a statement in there. Many hire experienced professionals, expecting them to be plug and play. Plug them in, ready to go. But I think that is not the case. How do we feel?
It's never the case.
Yeah.
Never the case, right? I mean, how do we feel when we're new in a job? I think we've all experienced that. How do we feel and what do we need? We feel new.
Well, I think you feel really unsure because unless you have direct training, you really have no idea what the expectations are, what their way of accomplishing things are. And so it's just like you're walking on eggshells.
Yes.
I think it just is. It's all about time and experience. You obviously don't know what you don't know until you go through it. And for me, I'm not too worried about a guy that doesn't know all the answers, because together as a group we can figure it out. Unfortunately, a lot of jobs are what they say is on the job training. You sometimes have to make some of these mistakes, and then you'll never do it again. You'll move on and or understand, hey, I could have done it better this way for the next time. So I think it's just, you can only train and teach somebody so much, and then it's just, hey, you got to let them get out there and see what they can do. And if they can't do it, then you readdress and establish sort of a baseline and go from there, and hopefully they can get it. But if they can't, maybe they're just not cut out for the job.
But don't you think you have to have some guidance as you're new onto a job, you can't just say, okay, here you go.
Well, yeah, I mean the whole deal
Right?
about them talking about the mentor, it's super important. You know, that's probably the most important on the job training. You know, you can only teach somebody so much with training. They
Correct.
got to get out there and do it and make the decisions themselves,
Correct.
and then come to you. Hey, here's what I did. What do you think? Okay, or here's what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think?
Correct.
So having that mentor that's, you know, established and you know, loyal or sort of you know, company man, so to speak, is important. Getting them set up with somebody that they can trust and feel comfortable coming to for questions.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think you're both right on it, because you have to do, we call it onboarding is one term for it, but then it gets to the point of, okay, this new employee needs to perform. So we look at that initial time, whatever it might be, the first 60, 90 days, but then we've got performance expectations as well. You know,
Right.
So part of that onboarding, I'm a big proponent or a big fan of cross training.
mhm.
You know, I think you
Yeah.
get a person in their position, they got to know what the person next to them and the person below them and even their boss, what their boss does. I mean, they got to understand the full facet of their role or what the company does to really, you know, to really be able to excel in their position. I think, you know, I think a lot of companies do a disservice of just, you know, being so myopic and blind, you know, putting these people in positions that have just their blinders on. Hey, you do this task and that's it. You know, you got to really help people be, you know, versatile and cross over to, you know, one, it helps the organization when there's a need, those people can fill in. You know, if someone decides to quit and leave the company and you can't fill the position right away, then everyone can pick up the slack. So, you know, that's one benefit for the company, but really it helps the person, you know, be able to excel in their position and really, you know, I guess expand their experience in the job.
Yeah, I totally agree.
This reminds me of how BYU Idaho handles jobs within their organization. They hire students part-time for like most everything, and they have a full-time employee in most departments who's there the entire time to supervise. But I always tell people whenever they're on the phone with somebody to like don't take for granted that it's going to get done, because these students never go beyond what their job asks of them. And I don't know where they're getting that from. And I've talked to some friends who are like education majors, and there's a tendency for people to just stay within the lines all the time, color within the lines, basically. Don't ever go against what the rules are and the policies are, and make sure you're doing everything right. But if somebody's not doing their job, how are you going to pick up on it if you're only focused on what you're doing? Like what happens if this persists for such a point where there's like irreparable damage to whatever your objective is? Like, I'm working for another survey place now, and it took us, we were on the same survey for about a month, and it should have been done within 2 weeks. And there was some kind of error that nobody had picked up on until it had gone on for a month, and it was disqualifying people from the survey when it shouldn't have been. And if somebody had picked up on it sooner, like if us as agents knew more about the process by which things were programmed and could pick up on that type of thing sooner, it would have saved the company a whole lot of time.
That's interesting. Now, being able to look for those things, look outside of our normal set of influence, outside cues, and that's a leadership principle. Being able to be externally open enough to recognize the flow of things. So, you know, in discussing this and here listening to you guys, I appreciate it. It's important to look for certain key attributes and know those attributes that we are looking for when we're selecting talent, right? So it goes back to the thought, you know, look, but it's hard to look if you don't, because you get what you're looking for is the other sibling phrase I use. You get what you're looking for, so you're going to get whatever, something random if you don't know what you're looking for. So how do we identify the attributes that we want to that are most important in our candidates?
I think it begins with, you've got to have your core values, whatever they may be, or your mantra, or whatever your 4 or 5 most important things that you want from your company or your group that you're over, that you're hiring for, and then base everything on those 5 things. So if integrity and leadership and teamwork and being happy, or if those are your 4 most important things, then those are the 4 things that you look for when you're interviewing somebody. Do they fit into those categories? If not, how much of it are they off base? Is one of them maybe off base and the other 3 are super strong? That's where you need to evaluate what is most important, but already go into the interview with that information so that you know what you're looking for.
What's that?
Yeah, appreciate that. How do we know if we have the right set of values for our organization?
Honestly, so this goes into the rabbit hole that is psychological testing. And, it's a nightmare. Like, I feel like a lot of companies cut corners on actually figuring out things about their candidates. Like, they'll just hand you a multiple choice quiz and be like, oh, this is accurate. And 9 times out of 10, it's not. Like none of these people have any kind of statistical background to be able to determine that. And they just do it because we need to have a uniform standard. But I think if they actually took the time, like I said before, to hire people in groups and have them actually work for the company for a certain period of time, you would have a lot more concrete qualitative evidence of how qualified they are.
Yeah.
Well, and how they fit into that role that you want.
Exactly.
So I worked for a company that did that. They focused heavily on an MIT program, manager and training program. So they'd bring them on board, kind of get them integrated to some of the key areas of the company, start them up in the call center, and cross-train, like Amadeo was talking about, cross-train them in different departments. Then they would place them. And so that's one way to look at it. And I'm
just going to comment one last thing before I got to head out. But I think one of the big things for me for hiring is, I've been doing a lot of, it's been over 6 years now of behavioral interviews. I think for me that is one of the key ways to find the right person for our organization. Everyone, or most people in interviews, they always give these generic answers. I'm really good. I can do this.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, what does that even mean? It's so arbitrary. Like, I'm good at what? What do you even do? But I've found when you do behavioral interviews and you ask specific questions, like, tell me a time that you had to complete a task and you didn't have the proper tools to complete that task.
Yep.
What was the task and how were you able to complete it? And like 99% of the people that have a specific answer, not a generic answer, I complete tasks on time, or but they say, my boss told me to make a flyer. I wasn't familiar with this program, and so what I did was I Googled it, or whatever they were able to do to complete that task without the proper tools. If they have a specific answer, those people are that's what I'm looking for. Are you able to be resourceful, without having to get direction from somebody else, and so those types of behaviors and examples that you can give, specific examples, really tell me that you're able to comprehend, and you're going to be able to learn, not just I have to tell you step by step what to do.
Yeah.
Agree. Thanks for that. Yep. And that ties back in where I was headed. So behavior. So we have our values that we want to attach our talent to, but we have to identify the behaviors that connect to those values. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
So with Amadeo, we, like you said, we know what behaviors we want to target now. So let's formulate questions to identify those behaviors and do it in the right format. Tell me how to
Right.
or tell me how, so they can't say, yeah,
Agreed.
an example. So that's a great thing. I'll share a link with you guys up here. Sent me a link of a whole bunch of behavioral interview questions. So I'll send that out. You click on the topic you want, and it does that. So thanks, Amadeo.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Good night.
So that was, so I appreciate it. So you've got your value system, you've got your mission statement, your mantra. Then let's say you've got some behaviors targeted that you're going to interview for. There's one more area we can check it to, and it would be the whole overall strategy of the company. So you've got values and you've got behaviors, but we need to make sure that they're aligned to the whole strategy of how the company operates. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You can see how if those are not aligned, you're going to go off course. Any thoughts on that, or does that make sense?
I feel like it's just self-evident, but
Yeah.
It really is, but it's an important element, because you have to know what your strategy is as a company. How many times have you worked for a company or seen a company's mission statement, but you have no idea what it means, or you don't see it in action?
Yeah.
it's like 9 times out of 10 when I read something like that, it's completely nebulous. Like,
Yep.
It's totally vague and it means nothing. And
Right.
they
So
expect you to know that when you come in for the interview, and I'm just like, what are you trying to tell me here? I could pull out like 10 different things this actually means.
Yeah.
So, and as a result, many people, we all feel the same way. We're like, oh, it's just a mission statement, something they put on the wall in the lobby. So we've got to be able to think through that better. And when we bring in our new hires, I asked them, I said, how many of you have your own mission statement? And how many of you know what your key 5 or 6 values are? Maybe I brought that up in class before, I can't remember. But if people smirk at that and they're like, but it's if we know what drives us, if we know what makes us go, we know what they can then contribute to the operation. So
Yep.
In my opinion, you want to find people that know themselves and are open to discovering other capabilities.
Agreed.
So back to this onboarding thing, or kind of this training, integrating people. How can that benefit us in our lives elsewhere? Workplace, families, households. What do you think? Any application we can draw from that?
I never thought about it like this.
Got the wheels turning?
Yeah. Give me a minute.
No worries.
Maybe just like in any situation where you're in a leadership position and you're delegating, it would be good to know this stuff, because then you start looking for specific things that people do that they're good at that don't necessarily have much to do with what work needs to be done, but how the work is done.
Yeah, I like that. From a leadership standpoint, being aware of the need to integrate people, but ideally doing it in a way that lets them get the work done in their own style.
Yeah.
Without letting the important components fall through the cracks. Yeah, I like that. And you think about callings. If you've been new in a calling, that's what happens in the church. Like, hey, congratulations, you're the Relief Society president. Here you go.
Figure it out.
Okay. But how how much more effective could that be of, yes, go and figure it out, but hey, I've got some support here, or I've got some best practices, or hey,
Yes.
I can go to the ward council and we can work together.
People don't realize this very often, but like when you're in a leadership position, you can literally tell people what to do, like in a calling. And people don't think about it that way because they think they have to be completely self-reliant, but that's the whole point of having the infrastructure that there is. Like, you can tell people what to do. You don't have to do everything.
Yeah,
I love that.
I think that's important to remember. I think maybe we've got to just, the thing to be mindful of is how we tell people what to do, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
obviously.
Oh, it's a great point. I appreciate that. So I'm working directly with our stake president, and he's amazing. And he's really amazing. I'm like, oh man, how can I serve the stake president? He knows what needs to go on. I'm supposed to keep him organized, but he's super organized. But he is wonderful because he knows that I have certain things that I'm bringing to my assignments. So he never tells, but he'll guide. If we need something done, he'll ask me. And if there's certain things that can't be missed, he'll let me know. But other than that, he'll give me an assignment, and he knows that I can get it done. But he's super supportive about it. So it's a great way to lead. So I think we've all been in situations, whether church or outside of the church, where we were asked to lead or have an assignment, and we floundered, we failed, or we did great, or we had support and we had people to counsel with. So that's the thought that came to mind for me, and missionary work. Think about President Hinckley teaching us what a new convert needs: a friend, a responsibility, and nourishment by the good word of God. So
Yeah.
I think when we're recruiting people, we don't necessarily need people don't need a friend, but definitely a mentor. Clear expectations on responsibilities, and good relationships that nourish that. And I think that's the way the Lord operates. He never leaves us. He's going to guide us. And that's the wonderful thing about the Spirit. The Lord is the perfect integrator, right?
Yeah.
I love the scriptures that say, I am able to do my own work. And I always, in my own mind, say, well, there's a parenthesis next to that that says, but I let you take part of it anyways. Because I know it will be good for you. So, any other thoughts on recruiting or talent selection? Anybody see this in a different way, maybe than they did before, of how important it can be?
I used to think that it wasn't super important because I feel like if someone has enough ambition, like you can tease out most of the qualities that you want from that type of person. But if you think about it, and if you take more time to actually learn about that person, putting them in different situations sometimes doesn't lead to that, just based on their own personal anxieties or things like that.
True.
So it matters a little bit more than what I thought, but I still lean toward what I thought before a little bit.
No, and I like your line of thought, because it is important for organizations to be flexible. But I think that the phrase that we always hear, and I think is true, is you can train for skill, but you've got to hire for attitude. You can't train attitude.
Yeah.
So, looking for those intangible attributes can be a huge boon or a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to accomplish, because you can train somebody to develop a skill, but if they don't have the right head forward or attitude or outlook, good luck. So, what about you?
Well, that's what I liked about that whole hiring them for a period of time and then really determining, do they fit or don't they fit? Because then I think after a certain amount of time, you can tell, do they have the right mindset? Do they have the right attitude, or do they just not at all? And you're right. If you can do a job, but that doesn't mean you do it well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so giving people opportunities, giving exposure to those different assignments or opportunities can indicate that. We do that in my daily work. We hire interns to do some of the supervisor duties for 2 months. 2 months, and we've had a couple say, "Ooh, this is not what I thought. I do not want to do this." And we say, "Okay, great, thank you. We appreciate that. We'll find something better for you to do."
There you go.
So talent and development, recruiting is just a piece of it, because once you close the deal, you're not done. In fact, the work only begins. So, but it is crucial, and that would be just going back to that original thought. You get what you're looking for. You just got to know what you're looking for. So, but good discussion. I appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts and perspectives. It's always a great way to learn.
I really think that last comment that you made, really know what you're looking for. I think that is so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily mean knowing how they interview or if they interview well or not, but really knowing what it is that you want. And do they have those skills or that mindset?
Yeah, it's huge. I had a experience with that. Even if you know what you're looking for, you still have to ask that question. We were hiring for a site director position. So this is somebody that was going to be the top leader of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
We had it down to the final 2 people, and I was there as the HR partner. So it's my job to kind of be the guide and help guide that thought process. The senior director was deliberating and trying to decide, and I asked him that question point blank. I said, "What do you really need? What do you really need in this position?" And that guided him. And he knew that from the beginning, but asking that question one more time kind of helped him pick the right path. So,
Well, good.
so I agree. Any questions from either of you? Anything?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Things are going great. I'm really enjoying it. So
Good to hear. Yeah, it's a fun course. It's the case studies are a lot of fun. We're lucky to have those. So, and you heard about the new university president?
yes.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for the online program or online degrees?
It's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
Honestly,
So from here on out, are all online degrees going through Pathway?
I don't know the particulars, but so I'm wondering a little bit of the same thing. But yeah, Pathway worldwide, and they said that it's going to just keep expanding. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I don't want to pontificate too much on online classes here, and this has been far and away my best experience with an online class as a student. But I'm kind of glad that this change is happening, because I feel like the focus we were having wasn't the best focus, and it just has to do with the way online classes are constructed. Because I'm a tutor, and I tutor both the lecture and the online sections for my class, and the things I've noticed with the way that class is structured in particular are really, really discouraging. So I'm hopeful with this change that there will be even better changes to come.
Well, good. I think it's a great move.
In fact, I'm planning on trying to meet with the people who actually construct online courses to see if I can make any kind of improvements, or if my professor can make any kind of improvements, because I've been tutoring the course for almost 3 years now. And then my professor's been teaching it for probably about 6 or 7 years now. And for whatever reason, they're using an outdated course model to construct the online course. And my professor actually told me that he has no power in designing the course, which is very strange to me because he's the expert.
That is very odd. Huh.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I'm very confused, but we'll see what we can figure out.
That's awesome. Yep. So President Gilbert will take over the online portion, and President Eyring, the new president of the college. So
yeah. Very interesting.
yeah, it's good. It's good to be part of it. So But
But
I mean,
it still will be BYU, right? It's BYU Pathway, BYU Idaho, BYU Provo, BYU Hawaii, right? So those are the four.
mhm.
That's amazing.
I'm in conflict management right now, and my professor said that he gets really irritated when people are offended when people say BYU Provo instead of BYU. Apparently, people get offended when you say something other than BYU.
Oh, down in Provo,
And
yeah.
I'm just like, bring your ego down a notch.
Yeah, seriously. Let it go.
Just the geography. It's okay.
Exactly.
Seriously.
Good. Well, I will keep working on those doohickey papers. I still
Okay.
have to look on the community page. I did a little survey about the learning model principles. Pick your favorite.
Yeah.
And I'll let that go for a little longer, and then we'll get the results.
My thing
All
about
right.
the learning model is that it's for us and not the class. Like, the class should be set up however the class is, and then we need to use the learning model on our own basis.
Yes.
Isn't that the truth?
Like, so often I see all these classes force people to do group work, and nobody, like, in a lot of cases it doesn't teach very well, but in some cases it does, but in a lot of cases it doesn't. And if people feel like they need to have groups, then they should go and do that themselves. That's part of the learning model. That's what we encourage. But that's for the students and not necessarily for the course structure.
Yeah. So yeah, we do that. We have the group element in this class because there's the process step of teach one another. So yeah, I definitely think it's formatted into this course. But yeah, definitely an individual set of principles. I mean, it'll help you throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, it's a great plan. All right. Well, thanks again. If anything comes up, let me know, and we'll see you next week.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a good week.
See ya.
Okay. See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.